just not good enough. Like, I feel average at everything. Like, I was at the gym earlier and literally some dude just like had to show me up.
Yo, good workout today, Xavier. Keep training and you will get as good as me.
See what I mean, dude? I'm literally like average height too.
You're 5'9"?
No, I'm 5'8", but like that's close
That
enough.
means you're below average.
Fine. Wait, don't you have a twin? You guys ever feel less capable than the other?
No?
But like how? You guys look so similar, go to the same college. I mean, I guess you guys have different dorms, but
Let me stop you there. Have you ever heard of the capabilities approach?
what is that?
Let me show you.
How should we define and measure poverty today? We should measure this using the capabilities approach. We'll define it later. What even is the capabilities approach? Capabilities are freedoms that people have to achieve their potential doings and beings. The capabilities approach focuses on one's capabilities, which are what a person is able to accomplish with the resources and means they have, and functionings, which are the goals that one has achieved. Why is this approach even necessary? Ingrid Robin says that there are two parts to it. The freedom to achieve well-being is of primary moral importance, and well-being should be understood in terms of people's capabilities and functionings.
Wait. So you're telling me that something we use to measure poverty is gonna help me become better than an average person?
Not quite. It more explains why people are in the situations they are, which if you pay attention might give you insight to understand your own capabilities. But let's take it back. We first need to define poverty.
Uh-huh. Tell me more.
So, what is poverty? Well, Google's AI overview tells us that poverty is a lack of basic necessities and resources for a minimum standard of living, such as food, water, shelter, healthcare, and education. But how do we define it? We think that if one lives in poverty, that means that they lack the basic necessities, capabilities, and means to live a dignified life. So that means that we first need to find the capabilities that it takes to have a dignified life. The most basic necessities are food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. However, having this doesn't mean that you don't live in poverty. So you need to measure the capabilities of someone to further assess their quality of life. But wait, how do we do that? Now we're back to the capabilities approach. So how is this measured? Nussbaum identifies and categorizes the basic capabilities someone needs to have a decent quality of life, or in other words, not be in poverty. She has 10 essential capabilities, and each one is crucial to measuring poverty. For example, other species determines if the individual is capable of having a relationship to its environment, while play determines if one has free time to do things they want.
Are you understanding it more now?
Well, I'm confused. You're saying that everyone has different capabilities, and depending on how they choose to use them, they have different functionings as a result?
I mean, yes and no. I think you need an example. Simon! Yo, what's up? Here, we need to explain the capabilities approach to Xavier. Simon and I have the same capabilities, but I work out 6 days a week and he works out 0 days a week. We both want to bench 2 plates, but because of my personal actions, I achieve it and he doesn't. Now, my functioning is greater than Simon's because I have accomplished this goal while he hasn't.
Okay, that's a stretch. I think I'm pretty buff myself.
So, Josh, if I were to master the capabilities approach, I could eventually bench more than Narc?
Well, the capabilities approach may say otherwise. Even though you guys have access to the same gym and lift the same amounts, because you have a muscle deficiency, you lack the capability to achieve the same functioning as him.
Sorry, bro.
That's what we call a conversion factor. So a resource may be more or less effective than intended due to the individual's capability to utilize the resource function with it, or to achieve the resource's goal with it.
That's interesting. Now I want to learn more about the best way to measure poverty. I read this thing about Robert Rector, about how poverty in the US is measured all wrong. Like how it's basically a scam.
A scam? How so?
Well, here you can see that poor households, for the most part, have all the basic necessities they need, and even have some luxuries such as a video game system. And it's not like Rector is the only person that sees the issue with this. He states that, quote, The overwhelming majority of the public do not regard a family living in these conditions as poor. One image that often comes to mind when we think of poverty is homelessness. Looking at this graph, though, there seem to be way more people who are considered impoverished, yet do not struggle with this problem. That's not to say that homelessness isn't a problem and shouldn't be addressed. However, there are much fewer homeless Americans than one might perceive if they hear that over 35 million Americans live in poverty. If someone who lives in poverty does own a house, this is a household many people would likely imagine. Almost no amenities and a tiny, old, crumbling home. However, this is rarely the case, and for the most part, poor people live in housing with adequate infrastructure and space.
I understand where you're coming from, but his article lacks necessary information. Just because someone has a fridge, does that mean that the fridge is in good condition? What if it's an apartment and the fridge comes with it? Just because someone's home isn't falling apart doesn't mean that they don't work 2 jobs and still struggle to pay off the mortgage or rent. Do you see what I'm getting at? So yes, Americans should know how the average poor person lives. However, it's unfair to think that their lifestyle is easy.
Huh, I didn't look at it that way. It seems like Rector is looking at this from only a materialistic view.
Exactly. There could be a lot more struggles in a household than just what the items in the house may imply. This is one reason why the capabilities approach is the best way to measure poverty.
But wait, I think the capabilities approach isn't as sound as you may think. Take a look.
Sen mentions that creating a universal list may not be the best idea. Nussbaum's list, he argues, has a Western bias, so the list may appear culturally imperialist. In this case, Western feminist ideas are illustrated in her list. So, for example, if education for women is not supported, then that would hurt the society on the measurement. However, women still may have important and dignified jobs in society, so the measurement could be messed up. Another problem with the capabilities measurement is that it is subjective as well. For example, how can you accurately measure the bodily integrity of a woman in a remote village in India? How are you supposed to tell if a man in Namibia has affiliation with others?
That's a really good point. Let's look at it this way.
Bias will always be present. You cannot make a list like this that won't have its own biases. Although Nussbaum's list does indeed have Western biases, the capabilities themselves do a very good job at assessing someone's quality of life. And there are efficient ways to measure the things on Nussbaum's list. If you're trying to measure affiliation, you can look at proxies, which are functionings of a capability. One proxy for affiliation would be assessing how many close friends does someone have, or how much time is spent at work instead of with family. Now, say someone doesn't have much affiliation, then they probably don't have much emotional attachment either. Lacking one capability may also mean you lack another. This is a corrosive disadvantage, and it makes measuring things a little easier too. Let's take another example. If someone has access to education and is determined to have senses, imagination, and thought, then there would be a higher chance of having practical reasoning. This is a fertile functioning, meaning that having one capability may mean you have another.
But you're right, this measurement is limited. It is tricky to measure specific details of every single person. However, there are still accurate and efficient methods to collect data. But because there isn't a flawless way to measure poverty, this is the best thing we have.
That makes sense. Thank you for telling me about this. Now I know how to best define and measure poverty. Plus, I can use the capabilities approach when comparing myself to Narek. I feel a lot better now. I feel like I'm capable of so much more. I feel
5'8", average at everything, a bum,